Good evening and welcome to our live online car buying seminar. My name's Nadine and I'm a public service programmer with the Hamilton Public Library. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight online and for staying in. And one of the things we're going to be discussing this evening, or the big thing, is you can actually buy a car now online. And I've brought a special guest with us who's joining us. His name's Scott Long, and I'm going to introduce you to him right now. Here we go. So Scott, you are up.
Oh, I'm up. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. My mistake here. I just noticed the big red rectangle. There we go. Yes. So my name is Scott Long, and if we could go to the next slide real quick, Nadine, that would be awesome.
Okay, I'm just figuring out how to do that. Just give me another minute.
No worries.
How's that?
There we go. Oh, that's good.
Fantastic.
Oh, look at that. That's when I had my hair cut last. Oh my goodness. Nowadays, look at this. It's all slicked back now. How embarrassing, but whatever.
I was supposed to get my hair cut today, Scott, and it's had to be rescheduled again, but hopefully we'll move into stage 2 next week and I will get a haircut.
Well, I was just going to say, I feel like I heard that Hamilton's allowed to go start opening some of those things up on Friday, if I'm not mistaken.
Very exciting. We're very excited about that.
Good. Yes, well, I can't wait either. Oh my goodness. But anyways, I digress. Of course, I always get distracted. So my name is Scott Long, and I work with OMVIC, the Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council. And if you say that 10 times fast, it is a bit of a mouthful. Better way to refer to us is Ontario's Vehicle Sales Regulator. And my job here as the Senior Education Officer is I get the privilege of coming to events like this to educate car buyers on their rights when they purchase a vehicle in Ontario. On the flip side of my job, however, I lecture car dealerships on their obligations when they sell cars to consumers. So as we get into it, I'm just going to give you a little bit of introduction info here on what OMVIC is and what we do. But there are a few terms I kind of want to get out of the way to make sure we can all understand. The first term is called a VIN, Vehicle Identification Number. And what a VIN is, it's a 17-digit unique code to every vehicle out there. So that means no two vehicles should have the exact same VIN. And basically what we use a VIN for is to kind of keep a track of the vehicles that are on the road. So when you go to the ministry to get your license plate renewed, to get your license updated, anything like that, you give them your VIN number, or they have your VIN number on file to see that that car is registered to you. And this segues very well into the next point I'm going to make, and it's called a vehicle history report. Now, a vehicle history report will tell you things about a car's past. Has it been in an accident? Has it been stolen and recovered by police? Has it, for example, been written off by an insurance company, let's say? Typically, a vehicle history report will give you all of that information. It is no guarantee, and we're going to go into much more detail about vehicle history reports shortly, but the VIN number is what you use to obtain one of those history reports. When you go to their website, you type it in, 17 digits. It's a bit of a pain to try to memorize that number or say it all out loud, but once you get it in there, it'll give you all that kind of stuff. So what is OMVIC at the end of the day? For those of you who haven't heard of us, you may recognize us from our commercial on television right now. It's basically saying you can buy a car online, and we have a little jingle with our other one too, saying, you know, I got you a picture. It's Take a Picture campaign for all in price advertising, which we're also going to go into. And forgive me for doing a little song and dance there. I'm used to having my audience with me, but I hope you're all enjoying it. But anyways, what is OMVIC? At the end of the day, OMVIC is a law enforcement agency. And what laws do we enforce? Well, if you look on the bottom right corner of your screen, you're going to see 3 pieces of legislation, 3 sets of rules that we enforce here at OMVIC. One, it's called the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act, and that is our holy grail legislation. That gives us the power to operate in Ontario. It gives us pretty much everything we're going to be talking about today. We also work within the Consumer Protection Act and the Sale of Goods Act as they apply to motor vehicle sales. Now, as we go throughout the presentation, I'll try to point out where the Consumer Protection Act and the Sale of Goods Act comes in. But for the most part, everything is from the MVDA there. So how do we do this? We enforce these laws on behalf of the government. So OMVIC is what's referred to as a DAA, a Delegated Administrative Authority, meaning the government has given us permission to enforce laws on their behalf. So we are not technically part of the government, but they do keep an eye on us. We do report to them to let them know how things are going and the updates on enforcement action as well. But the most important thing about OMVIC is that last point on the screen there, and that is we offer protection for Ontario car buyers. So if you ever have an issue with a vehicle, you feel like you need to complain about a car dealership, that is what OMVIC is here for. And I'm going to explain to you how we do our day-to-day operations at OMVIC in the next slide here. Whenever you're ready, Nadine, I'm happy to go. Thank you so much. So the first step we do at OMVIC is we register every single car dealer and every single car salesperson in the province. We basically license them. So if you want to sell cars as a business in Ontario, you want to what we call trade in motor vehicles, you must have registration with OMVIC in order to do so. To give you an idea, we're working with over 8,000 registered car dealerships and over 30,000 registered car salespeople. So there's quite a bit. And this doesn't matter if it's a new vehicle dealership or a very small vehicle dealership. It could be the one around the corner from your home, the one you see downtown in the city, or it could be the very large, what we call a franchise dealership, a dealership that has a brand name attached to it. And all of them have to have the same license. Of course, there are different classes of licenses. So if you want to be a wholesaler, meaning you only deal with dealers, you don't deal with consumers, you could have a wholesale license. But for the most part, what matters to you is they're going to have a general license, meaning they're allowed to sell to the public. Most of you here today are going to be what's referred to as a consumer, someone who's purchasing that vehicle for personal use. Corporations, when they purchase a vehicle, other things, business use, don't quite fall under the idea of a consumer. It's someone who's just using it for their own personal use. So there's no point in registering all these car dealers and salespeople if we're not going to keep an eye on them. So we have a team of inspectors stationed throughout the province, and they go into dealerships day in and day out and take a look at car dealers' books and records, all sorts of things to make sure that they're operating within the law. Next thing up, and that's one I already alluded to, is we provide free complaint handling. So if you ever feel like a dealer may have maybe broken the law, or you feel like you just have a question about buying a car, you can reach out to OMVIC at any time, absolutely free of charge, and have your question or your complaint answered. If it's a complaint, and I hope none of you ever have to go through this, basically all it is that you call up OMVIC, we'll give you some advice up front. We would rather see consumers and dealers solve their issues or their misunderstandings between each other first before we have to get involved. In the event that we do need to get involved, you'll get a complaint handler. So someone who works at OMVIC, they'll be assigned to your case and they'll reach out to the car dealership on your behalf to try to negotiate a resolution. They are very effective at their job and they're very good at it and very kind. To give you an idea though, and one thing I always like to stress in these, I guess, webinars now, not seminars at this time, is that our complaint handlers are not judges. So a judge is the only person in Ontario who can force someone to do something in a particular moment. So let's say you feel like you're owed $5,000. Only a judge can make that order for someone else to pay you that $5,000. In Ontario, we're very lucky to have the right to appeal and to a fair trial, all sorts of things like that. Our complaint handlers are mediators, but they've returned easily close to $1 million last year alone just through their mediation efforts, so they're very effective. Next up, we deliver education programs, and that is my job here at OMVIC along with my colleagues. I hope we do a good job of it today. Feel free to give me lots of feedback at the end so I can improve, make any changes. Happy to help out there. And finally, we investigate and prosecute illegal activity. So I mentioned at the beginning we have to register, we have to license all car dealers and salespeople. Of course, there are those who don't want to follow the law, and we refer to those people as curbsiders, illegal, unlicensed dealers, people who are selling cars when they ought to have a license or registration to do so. Now, let's say you want to sell your own vehicle. You say, Scott, I'm kind of confused. Why do I have to have a license to sell my car? Well, you don't. If you want to sell your personal vehicle, just you put it onto Kijiji, you put it onto Craigslist, or you put it onto wherever in the classifieds, you are more than welcome to do that. There is no law against that. Where it becomes a matter that would involve OMVIC is when you want to make a business out of it. So you want to buy a few cars because you think you can fix them up, or you know a few people who would pay a bit more for them, and you're going to make a profit potentially. You are now trading in motor vehicles as a business. So in that circumstance there, you would have to have registration with OMVIC. And that is the kind of the key differences there, but you are welcome to sell your personal vehicle. And I guess we're going to move on. Look at that there. Gosh, Nadine, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I want to, so Nadine and I, we're going to kind of play back and forth a little bit as we go throughout here. This, I do want to mention, this is a new setting for me in webinars. I've always done seminars going in person, but it's an exciting time to try out a new venue, if you will. So I'm going to explain the difference here between an OMVIC registered dealer and a private seller. So as we go through here, there's some checklists involved here with some animations on the slide. So if you buy from a dealer, the purchase is covered by consumer protection laws. Absolutely. And if Nadine, I could get you to hit the space bar or the click on the slide for me there, it's going to bring up some check marks for us. Fabulous. Thank you. Let's say you decide to buy privately, however. So you go online to the classifieds to try and find a private seller, or you go to your neighbor across the street. That is a private seller. And if we keep going forward here, it is not covered by consumer protection laws. When you buy from a dealer, you're entitled to advertising rules. So the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act has a set of rules that dealers must abide by when they advertise vehicles. When you buy from a private seller, however, there are no advertising rules. When you buy from a dealer, you're entitled to full disclosure of a vehicle's history and condition. So for example, has the car been in an accident? Dealers have to disclose information like that to you, and we're going to go into more detail about that shortly. Private sellers, however, there is no legal obligation. There's no legislation saying they must disclose the vehicle's history and condition. Cancellation rights. So that basically means the right to return a vehicle. Granted, it's not for good reasons. It's for specific things that weren't disclosed to you, which we'll go into again more detail later. You have access to that right when you buy from a dealer. Private seller, however, you do not have access to that right. And I think we're seeing a bit of a theme here, if I'm not mistaken. And finally, access to the Motor Vehicle Dealers Compensation Fund. Now that is there in kind of a last case scenario. Say the transaction between you and the dealer went so horribly wrong. And I'll give you an example as when we get to that section in the webinar today. You may be entitled to access up to $45,000 per transaction in those circumstances there, which I hope, again, similar to complaint handling, I hope none of you ever need to find yourself in a situation, but it's nice to know it's there. Private seller, however, you don't have access to that there. So here at OMVIC, we only have legal jurisdiction to enforce these laws over registered dealers, or sometimes what we refer to in the office as registrants, people who are registered with OMVIC, which is compulsory to trade in motor vehicles. We have no legal jurisdiction over private sellers. So we're going to get into private selling at the end here, but all of these laws are going to apply at a car dealership. So I believe we're going to jump into disclosure here. This is very exciting. This is my favorite topic at OMVIC here. So the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act has 22 explicit requirements for disclosure that must be in writing on the contract. So when you buy a car in Ontario, you're going to be presented with a bill of sale or a contract, a document that's going to outline the entire financial disclosures, all sorts of things about the vehicle that you're buying. It's required for vehicle sales in Ontario. So when we're talking about disclosure here, disclosure basically means things that a dealer has to tell you about a vehicle's past use history and condition. So if it was used for a specific purpose, if something happened to the car, there are 22 things that must be disclosed to you if they apply. I'm not going to cover all 22. I'm going to cover some of the more common ones as we go. But if we move on here, I know a lot of you are just listening in live, but I'll get you to answer this in your living rooms, your bedrooms, your dining rooms, wherever you are. Question for you, and I think we should all know the answer because I've mentioned it a few times now. If you buy from a dealer, do they have to tell you if the car has been in an accident? They absolutely have to, yes. So the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act says that if a vehicle has been involved in a collision or an accident that resulted in $3,000 or more in damage, it must be disclosed to you. Not only must the dealer have to tell you about it, it's got to be in writing on that contract. It has to be written on there for that disclosure to apply. So if we look at this example here, this is kind of a screenshot of a contract. We see an $8,487 accident repair. That would be sufficient disclosure. When it comes to under $3,000, when we get to the end of the disclosure section, I will let you know how that works, but just stay tuned for a bit longer and I'll fill you in there. But if it's over $3,000, it's got to be disclosed to you. And if the dealer knows the cost of the repairs, if they know exactly how much it costs to fix that car, that's got to be disclosed to you as well. And I mentioned earlier with vehicle history reports, most of this information will be on a vehicle history report, and dealers 99% of the time will run one to make sure that they're giving full disclosure here. Excuse me. So further disclosure is also required for any major component that needs to be repaired on the vehicle, and the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act spells out what those components are. So it's the engine, the transmission, the powertrain, the subframe and suspension, the computer system, the electrical system, and the fuel system. Now, I've done this presentation many times, and I'm not sure if I'm proud or if I'm embarrassed to say I have that list memorized. But in any event, if you're kind of like me and you drive a car just because, you know, you need to get from point A to point B, or you just like driving and you don't really know how the car kind of works, well, I can tell you that those items there keep the car up off the road and moving down it. And thank goodness the air conditioning is on that list. I think you all saw my photograph at the beginning there. That hair takes at least 25 minutes in the morning to do. And if I didn't have air conditioning in the summer, I might as well shave it all off or kind of do the look I'm doing right now because it's too long to style at this point. But air conditioning is required. And on the next slide, we've got an example here of what that could look like. AC is blowing warm air. It needs to be repaired. That would be a sufficient disclosure for a dealer disclosing the AC isn't working. Or even think about if you're on Highway 401. We've all been there. And even with our current situation, there's still traffic. I think next week we're going to be pushing 35 degrees again. And you're going to want that working AC if you're stuck in traffic on the highway. So further disclosure is also required for flood damaged vehicles. Now, a vehicle that's flood damaged, it has to be submerged in a liquid. So it has to go into the interior floorboards of the vehicle. Just like these images you see on the screen here, the vehicle can't simply have had maybe some water spill in the back seat. We've all been there, kids, things like that. The vehicle has to be submerged in the liquid to penetrate the interior floorboards. Now, the image on the right here, it's one of my favorite images. That's on the Don Valley Parkway in Toronto. And you can kind of see in the back there an arch of a bridge. And I live right by there. And it is so entertaining watching all the people drive into the flooded DVP with their vehicles. And I look at all of those and go, well, those are going to be some flood damaged cars, and that's going to require disclosure one day. But don't be like them. Don't drive on the DVP when it's flooded, unless you want to get your car written off by the insurance company. But anyways, the same idea is also going to apply for a vehicle that has been damaged in a fire. So it doesn't need to be the floorboard distinction there. It doesn't have the fire doesn't have to go to the interior floorboards, but if the vehicle's been on fire, it must be disclosed to you. Now, I also want to talk about the vehicle branding program that was established in 2003. So this is done by the Ministry of Transportation, and the image on the screen there is going to look familiar to many of you. It is a vehicle permit, or what's better known as your ownership. So if you're pulled over by the police, they're going to say license and registration. And this is what they mean by registration, a document that says, you know what, I, Scott Long, own this car that I drive here. Now, there's something called a brand. And a brand speaks to the vehicle's condition, and it follows that car forever. So if a vehicle is branded, it is basically tattooed. It's attached to that VIN. Remember the VIN number there. So whenever that vehicle is searched in MTO, if it comes up in a vehicle history report, we are going to be able to see if there is that permanent brand. Now let's go through what those are. The first one is irreparable or irreparable, however you want to pronounce it. That means it was written off as a total loss and can never be driven on the road again. Now, I referred to total loss. That means if a vehicle's been involved in a collision or whatever the case may be, an insurance company would look at that car and say, you know what, we're going to write this car off and we're going to cut the person a check or give them money to purchase a new vehicle, whatever the write-off amount is on that vehicle. Now, an irreparable vehicle has to first be written off, and it means it will never be driven on the road again. It can never be repaired. Nothing will ever bring that car back. Typically, flood damaged vehicles will be branded as irreparable. So you shouldn't have to worry too much about coming across one of those. Next up is salvaged vehicle. So a salvaged vehicle is also written off as a total loss, but it could be repaired and used for parts. It could also be repaired and be put back on the road again. So if it's going to be put back on the road again, it will become a rebuilt vehicle. So in order for a salvage car to become a rebuilt car, it has to go through two inspections. One, a safety standard certificate. And number two, it has to go through a structural inspection as well to ensure that that vehicle is safe to be driven on the road. Now, we all know what a safety is. Safety is the minimum standards that a vehicle has to meet to be driven on the road. So if you go and buy a used car tomorrow, it has to pass a safety certification in order to be legally driven on the road. Not a structural inspection. That's only if it was a salvage vehicle previously to get that rebuilt brand. And finally, we have the none brand. And none means that there is no brand on it, which is what most of you are going to have on your vehicles, or it means there's a brand that has been registered on that vehicle prior to 2003. But again, most of us are going to be looking at cars newer than that. It's hard to believe that 2003 was 17 years ago, yet here we are today in 2020, living quite the exciting world right now. And we'll be moving on here. Perfect, thank you. Further disclosure is also required for a vehicle that has been registered outside of Ontario. So basically, if it's gotten a license plate on it, it's been registered like we register cars here in Ontario in another jurisdiction. So I am not saying province intentionally because it could be from the United States. It could be from Quebec. It could be from Manitoba. Any capacity, if it's within the last 7 years that that vehicle was ever registered outside of Ontario, it must be disclosed to you. Now, there's one thing I have on the screen here. It shows a bunch of cars. It looks like they're flood damaged. That looks like it went to the interior floorboards on it. But you're probably going to see the United States or Texas flag there. And sometimes we get a little worried at OMVIC that during hurricane season, a lot of the vehicles that are in the US may be subject to flood damage, things like that. And they could wiggle their way up into Canada, and disclosure may not come with it. That is why this out-of-province disclosure is so crucial, to alert us that, you know what, there could be information about this car that's not readily available. So we maybe have to do an inspection on the vehicle, things like that, to make sure we get the disclosure that we need. So prior use as well. If the vehicle was ever used as a taxi or a limousine, it must be disclosed to you. Now, before I get a question on it, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering about ride-sharing services. Ride-sharing services are new. So the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act was put into force in 2010, and those ride-sharing services did not exist in 2010. So there's a few things to keep in mind here. Ride-sharing services, are they a taxi? Many people would assume that they are. You know, they're used in a similar capacity as a taxi, things like that. But what we need to be to think about here is that it's a personal vehicle. A taxi is designed to be a taxi. If I wanted to go use my car as a ride-sharing service, I wouldn't have to make any modifications to it. I could just register and go from there. The other big issue we have here is that we don't necessarily have a legal definition of the ride sharing services. We don't have something in black and white that says, you know what, this ride share is a taxi. We also don't know how often it was used in that capacity, or if maybe it was once, maybe it was every single day. There's no way to get that information. So at this time, ride sharing services do not fall under the purview as taxi disclosure. But if a dealer knows that the vehicle was used in that way, they got to tell you about it. And I'll tell you why shortly. We're getting to the end of disclosure here. Just bear with me. The same thing also applies for police or emergency service vehicles, of course. If it was used as a police car, an ambulance, fire, it could be an SUV like in the photographs here. It could be a genuine ambulance, but it's got to be disclosed to you in writing. I could go into reasons as to why it might be important to know if it was used as a police vehicle, but I think we can all agree on why that's an important piece of information. So this is a very interesting one here, and it's called former daily rental. And Nadine, in a few moments here, I'm going to pick on you, not in a bad way, don't worry. Former daily rentals. Now, so if the vehicle is ever used, maybe an Enterprise, Avis car, all sorts of things like that, that's great. That's awesome the car was used in that capacity. But it must be disclosed to you. It must be disclosed to you in writing. There is a trick, however. So I'm going to pretend I'm a dealer. We're running Scott's 123 Autos. And I went to the dealer auction. There are such things as auctions that only dealers have access to. The general public cannot access them. And I go purchase a daily rental, a former daily rental. Nadine is my buyer. I sell Nadine here. It looks like the picture on the left here. Goodness me, I know way too much about cars. I can tell what they are from a headlight, but that's a minivan on the left there, and the one on the right is a sedan. And let's say I sell Nadine the sedan. Nadine buys it from me, and I disclose to her that it's a daily rental. I say, yes, Nadine, this car is a former daily rental. Nadine gives me the thumbs up. She's good to go. But, you know, it's been a few years now, and she wants to buy the minivan. So she comes back to me and says, Scott, I'm going to trade in this car. And I go, great, no problem. Now that Nadine has owned the vehicle and has traded it back into me, I no longer need to disclose to the next buyer that it's a former daily rental. Here we go. Yeah, we're back where we are. I know, yeah, you were excited about the daily rentals. I think you bought a car recently, Nadine, eh? It went well for you?
I did last year, right before you did your last presentation. We thought the car would last longer, but we ended up having to buy a car very suddenly. And I was so happy after your presentation. I went back and there was all the OMVIC stuff it should have had. And I was like, yes, I did it right.
Well, you know, luckily for you, because you're the consumer, it's all these rules fall onto the dealer. So it's the dealer's obligation. And I'm very satisfied to see that that dealer was following all the rules. And most dealers, of course, do follow the rules. They like to operate fairly and make sure their customers are happy. So I want to talk about odometers. Odometers are the little clock on a car there, and you can see it in the bottom image. They tell you how far a car has driven. And here in Ontario, of course, we're in Canada, we follow the metric system. So the car is likely going to be in kilometers. If it's in miles, however, the dealer's got to disclose to you that the odometer is in miles, because 60,000 miles and 60,000 kilometers are two very different numbers. I believe 60,000 miles is roughly 100,000 kilometers. And I only know that from looking at the odometer on my, or the speedometer, I should say, on my car, where I see the 60 lines up with the 100 there, which is a big difference at the end of the day. But dealers can't simply rely on the odometer reading. They have to disclose to you the true distance a vehicle has traveled. Now, in this example here, we showcased this vehicle at the Canadian International Auto Show in February this year. It was sold by a curbsider, an illegal unlicensed dealer. And what happened here is that it had a rollback odometer. So in the advertisement, it said there was 131,000 kilometers on the car. And the odometer actually said that as well. The odometer said there was only 131,000. But after an investigation at OMVIC, we determined that that vehicle actually had 231,000 kilometers on it.
Wow.
Now, odometer, yes, exactly. It was a big discrepancy here. There are two major things that can affect a vehicle's value. One is the age of the vehicle. So older vehicles are going to cost less money. Newer vehicles are going to cost more money. And next is the odometer reading. The more kilometers a vehicle has driven, the less value it's going to have. The less kilometers it's driven, the higher value it's going to add. So this illegal unlicensed dealer here, they were able to make extra money on this vehicle because they lied and said that it was a different odometer reading. Now, dealers, like I said, have to disclose to you the true distance traveled. But what if they came across a vehicle like this? They said they found out that it had a rolled back odometer. Now, they have a couple options here. One, they could say, you know what, last September, so September 2019, we are able to determine that the vehicle had, let's say, 211,000 kilometers on it. But we don't know what the true odometer reading is now. The odometer is inaccurate and the true distance traveled is believed to be much higher. The other disclosure they could give you is, we have no idea what the odometer reading is on this vehicle. The true distance traveled could be substantially higher. So it's not that if they come across a vehicle, they don't have to not sell it. They just have to put the appropriate disclosure with it here. Now, I believe up next, we got our material facts, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we do. I've done this presentation so many times. This is probably one of my most favorite disclosures, and it's called material facts. That is anything else about a vehicle's past use history, condition, or performance or quality, to use the definition straight from the legislation here, that could be expected to influence a reasonable consumer's decision to purchase a vehicle or determine a fair price. So now this is anything else about a vehicle that could change your mind about buying it or determining a fair price for it. And the most common material fact is probably going to be accidents under $3,000. I mentioned earlier that accidents over $3,000 must be disclosed in writing on the contract. Many dealers have told me, Scott, I have a $1 policy. If it only costs $1 to repair that vehicle, we will disclose it. And oftentimes, minor collisions are going to be considered material. Now, let's say it's a 20-year-old car that had a $500 accident on it. That may not be material to some people. You know, it's an old car already. It's probably got a lot of kilometers on it. A $500 accident probably won't change that person's mind. Another material fact, and you can see in the two images beneath there, are ride-sharing services and a smoker vehicle, let's say. So if a dealer knows that the vehicle was used for ride sharing, they should probably disclose it because it would likely change someone's mind about buying that car. The same as the vehicle was smoked in. Many of us here, I'm sure, would like to know if the vehicle was previously smoked in. We may not want a car that was previously smoked in. That could be considered a material fact at the end of the day. If a dealer asks me, they say, hey, Scott, I want to know if this is a material fact. And the first thing I say to them is, you know, the fact that you're asking, fact. The fact that you're asking probably means that it is a material fact. I think I got one more example coming up here. This image here. I would never guess that that little Toyota pickup truck would be used to plow snow unless I saw this picture. Plowing snow is a lot of wear and tear on a vehicle. It's work on the front end, the axle and stuff there. So I would never know that that truck was used to plow snow unless I saw this photograph. And that could be considered a material fact for me at the end of the day here. So I just want to remind everybody that all these disclosures I just went over are required by law. Dealers must disclose this stuff to you in writing on a contract if they apply. There is no requirement for a private seller to disclose this information to you. There is no Motor Vehicle Dealers Act for private sales. So I'm going to move into advertising here. And my mistake here. I'm not going into advertising. I rearranged my presentation a little bit. I'm going to talk about contracts real quick. Those big, huge contracts you get when you buy a car. So let's say, you know what, we're going to buy a car today, and everything was disclosed to us, or nothing was disclosed to us because no disclosures applied. But we're going to sign the contract. We're going to sign it, and we're going to be ready to buy that vehicle. So just for everyone to think about at home here, do you think you have 10 days to change your mind about purchasing that vehicle? So we signed the contract, but we haven't picked up the car. That's a key piece of information here. There's something called a delivery date when you purchase a vehicle. And delivery is exactly what it sounds like. It's the day the dealer is going to give you the keys to that car. You're going to pick up that vehicle. It's going to be delivered to your home, however you've set up the deal, and you're going to drive off a happy camper. But before you take delivery and after you've signed the contract, do you have 10 days to change your mind, 2 days to change your mind, 1 day to change your mind, or no days? Well, the answer here is no days. In Ontario, there is no cooling off period, meaning there's no cooling off on the contract. Once you sign a contract, the sale is final. Now, in the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act, it says that the sales final clause, which you can kind of see in the picture here, it has to be in 14-point bold font. It literally says that, 14-point bold font, so that you know when you sign this contract, the sale is final. It is legally binding. The biggest piece of advice I can give you today is sign absolutely nothing unless you are certain you want to purchase that vehicle. And I will be regurgitating this as I go throughout the presentation. Sign nothing unless you are certain you want to buy that car. And we'll get moving on here. But let's say you put a deposit on that vehicle. Oftentimes when you buy a car, you're going to put a $500 down, $1,000 down as a deposit, which will either be credited back to you or put towards the purchase price of the vehicle. But let's say you gave a deposit and you didn't sign a contract. Can you still change your mind? Of course. The law is black and white on this one here. If you've given a deposit but you didn't sign the contract, you are entitled to cancel at any time and get a full refund of your deposit. But let's say you did sign a contract and you put a deposit down and you wanted to cancel. And I'm hoping none of you want to do that because now you know that when you sign a contract, the sale is final. The dealer has a few options here. One, they could say, yep, we'll give you your deposit back. Hope you do business with us again. Their second option, or which may also be their first one, whatever order they prefer, they could say, well, why don't you want to buy this car? Why don't you want this vehicle? Maybe we can apply your deposit to something else. And finally, they could sue you in civil court and force you to take delivery of the vehicle. I can't think of a situation on the top of my head where that's ever happened. But again, none of you are going to find yourselves in this circumstance here because you've never been in that circumstance, because you know that the sale is final. Now, I just want to touch on the previous slide here, and we can say on this one, Nadine, it's no big deal. You are welcome to add your own conditions to a contract. So contracts are like any other contract out there, can be conditional, meaning there has to be something that has to occur to make that contract work. And the most common condition when it comes to contracts is financing. So many of us, unless there's someone out there who can do this, I know for myself at least, I can't walk into a car dealership, look at a vehicle that costs $30,000 and simply say, debit please, I need to get a loan to purchase that vehicle. So let's say I apply for that loan at the dealership and that loan is denied. I looked at a car, let's say it was a new vehicle for a 5-year loan, 60 months at 3.99%. And the bank denied me. They said, Scott, you don't have the credit to get that loan. A condition has not been met in that contract, which means the contract can be canceled and I can get a return of my money. Now, you are welcome to add your own as well. In the example here, I always put on my contracts when I purchase the vehicle that it's subject to my insurance premium not exceeding a certain amount of money. Insurance premiums vary depending on the vehicle, depending on the driver, and where you live as well. So it may be a good idea to know how much you're going to be paying in insurance each month or each year for a vehicle before you commit to purchasing it. I want to tell a quick story here. I grew up in Muskoka, the Muskoka area, a few hours north of Toronto. And my father always liked to have brand new trucks. It was his thing, you know. I'm kind of high maintenance. This is probably where I get it from. And my dad, one day, he was the kind of guy who would be rolling in the door at 5:06 p.m. on the dot, and it was It was about 7 o'clock one night, and up comes the driveway is a brand new blue pickup truck. The guy had the biggest grin on his face you'd ever seen. He was so excited. He pretty much skips inside the house, runs in and says, "Everybody come on outside. I got the new truck. I got a great deal on it. I can't wait for you all to see it. We're going to go get ice cream, but you can't eat ice cream inside the truck." Whatever. After a few months, we were able to eat ice cream in there. But anyways, for those of you who are wondering, if you've seen the movie Jurassic Park where the dinosaurs fight, that's what happened in the kitchen. My mother was livid that he purchased that truck without her approval first. So what my father should have done was said, "This deal is subject to my wife's approval. You're welcome to add conditions like that, subject to my partner's approval, subject to my insurance premium not exceeding a certain amount of money." A dealer can always say no. They could say, "You know what? No, we don't agree to that condition," and they are more than welcome to. The decision is yours as if you want to proceed with that deal or not. Now I'm going to talk about the 6 deadly sins. These are the 6 things that can give you contract cancellation. Now, not only will they cancel a contract for you, they will give you something what's called rescission. Rescission means a contract is undone as if it didn't happen. It means you, as the person who went into that contract, are put into a position you were in before you ever signed the deal. Now, let's say you bought an insurance product. You bought rust proofing, an extended warranty. All of those things would have to be refunded to you if you're entitled to rescission. And of course, including the purchase price of the vehicle, the value of your trade-in or the trade-in back. Everything has to be undone. So these 6 items here on the screen, if they are not disclosed to you in writing on the contract, you are entitled to rescission within 90 days of delivery of the vehicle. Remember, delivery is the day you pick up the car. So previous use as a taxi or limo, ride sharing is not included at this time. The previous use as a police or emergency service vehicle. The previous use as a daily rental. Remember that little trick I told you with Nadine? If I sold the car to Nadine as a dealer and she trades it back in, the disclosure is allowed to disappear. If they didn't disclose the accurate make, model, and model year of the vehicle. So let's say we thought we were buying a 2018 model, but we found out it was a 2017. If the vehicle was branded on it, so if it was irreparable, salvage, or rebuilt, and it wasn't disclosed to you, you could get rescission. And finally, the actual distance traveled wasn't disclosed to you, or when it couldn't be determined and there was no appropriate disclosure statement. If any of these 6 things apply to your deal, you can get rescission within 90 days, only if they aren't disclosed to you in writing on that contract. Again, these are very rare, these circumstances. Number 6, which is distance traveled, is probably the most common ground for rescission, only because of administrative oversight. The wrong true distance traveled was put down on the bill of sale. But even in those circumstances, the law is black and white, you would be entitled to rescission at that point. And moving on to advertising. Yes, so we're getting to the end of what things dealers have to tell you. We're going to talk about private sales. We're going to talk about online sales very briefly. Not too briefly, sorry. We're going to talk about online sales and all sorts of things like that. And then when we get to the end of the presentation, I'm going to open up the Q&A. So advertising. Dealers have to advertise in a certain way. I'm only going to talk about one really particular thing that applies to you as a consumer. But what is considered an advertisement? Well, it's any offer to sell or lease a vehicle. And that could be in any medium. So it could be a newspaper, a magazine or a publication, the website, radio, television, social media, and even signs, including those displayed on a vehicle. So in the image on the screen here, we see that sticker on the side of the car. That is considered an advertisement, because it is inducing you. It's having you, oh, look at that. It's $16,988 for that vehicle. Maybe I'll go and purchase it, or maybe I'll go look at it. It is now considered an ad. But I got a question for you coming up here. We're going to go buy a car. We already talked about, the Nadine buying one for me, or whatever the case may be. So let's say Nadine is going to buy a car for me, and let's say I'm a registered dealer. I'm advertising my car for $10,000. When Nadine comes to buy that car from me, are there going to be additional fees on there? So it's no way, nope, it's not 10,000. Scott is going to add some fees on top of that price. There's no way I'm only paying 10,000. Or no, Scott can't add fees on top of that price. Well, the answer is I can't add fees on top of the price. So when I sell the vehicle, and I know in the example here it says $6,549, it doesn't matter. When I advertise a vehicle with a price as a dealer, that price must include every single fee and service I intend to collect from the consumer, with two exceptions. One is HST, and the next is licensing. So when we move on here, we'll see what some of those things are. So the OMVIC fee, that is how we get our funding here at OMVIC. So for every vehicle sold to a consumer, $10 must be remitted to us. We also collect registration fees from dealers, similar to how you get your license from MTO. But the dealer has the option of charging you the OMVIC fee or paying that fee on your behalf. If they're going to charge you for it, it must be built into the advertised price, and that is $10. Next up are administration fees. I've seen them easily run from $99 to $1,500, depending on the dealer. The dealer may charge an administration fee, but it's got to be built into the advertised price. Next are freight and PDI, so freight and inspection fees. PDI stands for pre-delivery inspection or pre-delivery expense. Freight can only be charged on a brand new vehicle. It cannot be charged on a used car because freight has already been paid on it. For those of you who've heard of demos, demonstrators, demo sale, whatever the case may be, a demo is a used vehicle. It may qualify for new vehicle incentives. So if a dealer advertises, says, hey, come buy this demo here, it's a used car from 2019, but it qualifies for the new vehicle interest rate. That is totally acceptable, but it can't be advertised as a brand new vehicle because it is not. Demos are used cars. There are also some services dealers may charge for. A nitrogen tire protection. So they put nitrogen gas inside of the tires instead of normal air. It is said to improve ride quality and fuel economy. Fuel as well, fuel. If a dealer wants to charge you for fuel, it must be built into the advertised price. And the same with any security or theft deterrent products, such as wheel locks or etching. Etching basically means that the VIN is etched onto certain parts of the vehicle to prevent theft, or if the vehicle is stolen and cut up for parts, they'd be able to track all those pieces on that vehicle there. So dealers are allowed to charge all of these fees. There's no law prohibiting a dealer from charging fees. As long as when they go to advertise that car, all of the fees are included, except for HST and licensing. Now, when you go into a dealership, you're going to see a sales contract that'll show you what all of those fees are. Dealers are required by law to show you what their fees are and how much they cost. It's only when they advertise it. So when you add up all those fees with the sale price of that vehicle and it doesn't go over the advertised price, they're in compliance with the law. But there's the two exceptions, which we have on our screen right now, HST and licensing. HST is 13% of the purchase price of that vehicle. So always keep in mind in your budget that there is going to be an additional 13% in taxes on that car. So on a $40,000 vehicle, I'm not sure what the math is. I'm not a mathematician here. I've become dependent on my iPhone calculator, but that 13%, factor that into your budget. You're going to have to pay that. HST is not payable on the value of your trade-in. So basically what that means is, let's say Nadine, again, is coming to buy a car from me and I'm a dealer, and she's trading in her vehicle. And I take a look at Nadine's car and I say, you know what, Nadine, I'm going to give you $5,000 for that vehicle. And the new car Nadine is buying is $20,000. So now instead of charging Nadine HST on $20,000, I'm only going to be charging her, or I should say the HST that's going to be paid is $15,000. We subtract the value of her trade-in from the purchase price of the vehicle. So HST on 13% on 15,000 is less than 13% on 20,000. So there's a bit of a benefit when you trade a vehicle in. And finally, licensing is allowed to be extra. Licensing is the cost to get plates and your permit. I believe right now to transfer your license plates, it's only $32. And I believe it's closer to 100 when you're buying new plates. The Ministry of Transportation sets those fees. OMVIC has no involvement when it comes to license plates and registration, but that is allowed to be extra. The reason they're allowed to be extra is many things in Ontario have HST as extra, and there's no way for a dealer to determine what your situation will be when it comes to licensing. Perhaps you have outstanding fees that need to be paid to prevent the transfer of the vehicle. Or if you are transferring plates, if it's going to cost less than buying brand new ones. So those are the only two things that are allowed to be as extra there. So I got a tip for you. When you're going to go buy a car, take a picture of the dealer's ad and bring it with you to your dealer. Go onto the dealership's website. Go to their section in the newspaper. Take a picture of that ad. And when you're shopping for it, and I'm sure many of you are going to be shopping virtually right now, send it to them in an email. Send it to them in a text message. Or if you choose to go into the dealership, bring that screenshot with you and say, you know what? I know my rights as a consumer, and I know that this vehicle is for sale for $10,000 on your website, and I only have to pay $10,000 plus HST and licensing. Now, let's say you negotiate with the dealer, and the dealer says, you know what? Or I'll use Nadine as an example again. I say, Nadine, I'm going to give you $1,000 off on the car. It's a $10,000 car. It's a big discount. You know, it's a 10% discount on that vehicle. I say, Nadine, I'm going to give you $1,000 off. Am I now allowed to put my administration fee back in there? The answer is no. When Nadine negotiated a price with me, she negotiated an all-in price. So it remains all-in throughout the process. Let's say I tried to add my administration fee back in. Nadine should walk away and call OMVIC and report the dealer. Report them to us at OMVIC here so we can look into it further on our end. If a dealer is breaking the law, shop elsewhere. Some of the advice I've gotten personally, it's from my father actually. I get very excited, if you can't tell, when I go and buy a car. And I call up my dad and I say, hey dad, I'm looking at this car. I really want to buy it, but I'm not sure about the price. And he says to me, you know what, Scott? First he says, calm down. And then he says, there's only another 1 million cars for sale. You'll find a good deal today. You'll find a good deal tomorrow. Take your time when it comes to purchasing a vehicle. If you are concerned that a dealer is breaking the law, you can give us a call at OMVIC. You can go on our website to just educate yourself further to see, and you can report them. You don't need to buy a car today. This is a lot of money you're putting down on the line here. And we'll move on here. It's simple, but there's still some confusion. Manufacturers, the people who build vehicles, also known as OEM, which stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer, they are exempt from the MVDA. So let's say this Tahoe here, we'll use that as an example. Chev wants to advertise that vehicle on television. Not my personal dealership, the manufacturer, the factory wants to advertise a vehicle. It doesn't have to comply with all-in price advertising. There's no requirement there. So that's why I would digress back to my original point. When you're shopping for a vehicle, go to the dealership section because that's where you're going to get an all-in price. The ad you see on television may not be all-in because manufacturers don't have to advertise their prices as all-in. And we'll move on to the next section here. We're going to talk about the compensation fund very briefly. It provides compensation to consumers who've suffered a financial loss as a result of a transaction with a registered dealer. Under certain circumstances, you could be eligible up to $45,000, and it is financed by registered dealers. To give you an example here, there was a dealership that went bankrupt and closed its doors. But where it was problematic was when that dealer didn't pay off the liens on trade-ins. So let's say I was the dealer. Nadine wanted to trade her car into me. but Nadine still owed money on her vehicle. And I said, no problem, Nadine. I'm going to get you a loan. It's going to pay off the loan on the car you have now. We're going to subtract the vehicle's value. So that was $5,000 earlier. I'm going to subtract $5,000. What I'm giving you is the trade-in. And the new loan is going to cover whatever is left owing on your car plus the new vehicle. But what happened is I didn't pay out the lien on Nadine's vehicle. So she was stuck with 2 car payments and only 1 car. I closed my doors, I went bankrupt, and OMVIC took away my license as a result of that. Nadine may be eligible for the compensation fund. There was a dealer that did something very similar to that back in 2017. We've had similar circumstances since, but 2017 was a big year for us. We paid out $1.11 million, and close to $500,000 of that was as a result of one dealer's actions there, not paying out liens on trade-ins and those consumers being stuck with that debt. The compensation fund was there to protect them and to ensure financial security in that aspect. It's going to be extremely unlikely you'll ever find yourself in a circumstance to go to the compensation fund, but it's nice to know that it's there. If you buy privately, you don't have access to it. Now, I want to talk about negative equity. This is in regards to vehicle financing. Now, negative equity means, it's kind of an oxymoron. It means when you owe more for a car than the car is worth. There's nothing that frustrates me more when someone says to me, oh, Scott, buy that car. It's an investment. Investments typically go up in value. Vehicles depreciate. It's going to be very rare. I would love for someone to tell me if they have a car, unless it's like a classic car or something like that, that's gone up in value. Typically, vehicles go down in value. I wake up each morning and I go, all right, just lost $3 in depreciation on my car. Looks like I'm not going to go buy coffee today. And I'm going to explain to you how that works. So Farah, she's actually my manager. We like to pick on her. She's on maternity leave, but she doesn't mind. Farah bought a car for $30,000 4 years ago. She financed it for $366 a month over 8 years, which is a 96-month loan at 3.99%. Farah drove her car 140,000 kilometers over the past 4 years. But she's got some kids now. She needs something bigger. She wants to get an SUV. That SUV costs $35,000. But remember, Farah's only 4 years into her loan. And because of that, she still owes $16,000 on her car. And because of depreciation and her higher than average kilometers on that vehicle, her car is only worth $7,000 wholesale. Now, when you trade a vehicle in, you're going to likely be offered the wholesale price for the car. That's how much it costs dealers to buy vehicles from auctions, from online marketplaces, and from each other, the wholesale value, not the retail value. Her car is only worth $7,000. But remember, she owes $16,000. That gap is called negative equity, $9,000 between what the car is worth and what she owes on it. Farah, she needs to buy this new car. So she has to borrow $44,000 to buy her $35,000 car. Her payments with interest jumped up to $538 a month. Imagine what's going to happen when Farah does this again in 4 years. Now, let's talk about extended term loans here. Typically, extended term loans are loans that are longer than 5 or 6 years. So if you want to get an extended term loan, there are some benefits. Your payment is going to be much cheaper than on a 4-year loan because you're taking that amount and stretching it out over a very long time. But ask yourself some questions before you get an extended term loan. How much do you drive? The more you drive, the more value is going to be lost in that car. How long do you intend on keeping the vehicle? If you're the kind of person that says, I like to get a new car every 3-4 years, maybe an 8-year loan isn't right for you. And also ask yourself, how quickly is that vehicle going to depreciate? A simple search online, you could go onto an online marketplace and search a vehicle that you're looking at, but 4 years older, to see how much they're selling for today. to give you an idea on what that car might be worth in 4 years. I know it's easy to get induced by those those cheaper payments. If you're the kind of person, however, that says, you know what, no, I'm going to keep this car, I'm going to drive it into the ground, then yeah, maybe that's that extended term loan is right for you. But it may not be right for everybody. I know for me personally, it isn't right. I like to get a new vehicle every few years. So if I did that, then that wouldn't be good for me. You might also consider leasing. It's a long-term car rental, a lease. You never actually own the vehicle. I actually leased my last car, and it's typically for 2 to 5 years you would lease a vehicle, so 24 to 60 months. It's much lower payments than a finance. So there are benefits to leasing there. Maybe that's an alternative to an extended term loan. But at the end of your lease, you're going to have two options. One, it's going to be a predetermined buyout for the vehicle. So at the end of your lease, there's going to be something called a residual value. It's something that the value that the manufacturer and dealer believe the car is going to be worth at the end of your lease. That's the residual value. You could pay them the residual value and keep the car, or you can return the lease because you're just renting it for a long period of time and possibly pay end of lease costs. Now, what are those? End of lease costs, excess wear and tear. Oh, one more, sorry, Nadine. There we go. Excess wear and tear. Let's say you're like me. I know I keep saying that, but I can be kind of clumsy, things like that. I put a dent into the car, maybe put a little scratch in it, you know, it happens. The dealer or the manufacturer might look at that and say, you know what? There's a big scratch on the car. Remember, you were only renting it. You were only leasing the vehicle. You're going to have to pay to fix it. Leases have kilometer allowances. So you could have a lease that says you're only allowed to put 16,000 kilometers on the car per year for 4 years, or maybe 20,000, 25,000 kilometers. I think the highest I've seen a lease go up is close to 30,000. I'm not so sure on that, but there are kilometer allowances. Remember, when you're renting that vehicle, they don't want there to be way too many kilometers on the car because that will affect its value. So if you go over the kilometer allowance, let's say at the end of the lease, you're only allowed to have 100,000 kilometers on the car, and you put 100,000 and 124, those 124 kilometers you're going to have to pay for. It may be 8 cents, 15 cents, 50 cents a kilometer extra. So watch out for that. If your circumstances change, so job loss, you're moving, something like that, you still have to make your next lease payment. It's hard to get out of a lease. We can see lease end expenses get into the thousands. So consider these things if you're going to lease a vehicle. It's right for many people. It worked out for me at the end of the day. I was lucky. I didn't go over my kilometer allowance. I came very close to going over my kilometer allowance, but that's why I did a finance. I got a loan for the vehicle that I have now so that I don't have to worry about going over the kilometers. And I believe we're going to be moving on just to a few more little tips here. Loan and finance. How much can you afford each month or bi-weekly? My recommendation to you is to not take your budget to the max. You never know what's going to happen. Check your insurance premium. Parking. We live in the GTA. We pay for parking no matter where we go or what we do. So factor that into your budget. Operating expenses. So that's brake jobs, so getting new brakes on a vehicle. Brakes are designed to be a wear and tear item, meaning over time they need to be replaced. Oil changes and fuel, you're going to have to factor that into your budget. If your car has a larger engine, it is likely going to need to use more fuel. If it's a high-end vehicle, it's likely going to need premium oil changes and premium fuel, which costs more money. Factor all of these things into your budget. How many kilometers do you drive? The more you drive, the more you're going to pay in maintenance. And finally, you may want to consider getting a warranty for the vehicle, an extended warranty, if you can't afford unexpected repairs. Big repairs on cars can cost a lot of money. Again, you don't need to buy an extended warranty with a vehicle. If you see value in it, you are more than welcome to purchase it. This is going to be your car. make sure you tell the salesperson what you need the vehicle for. This is in the Sale of Goods Act that a vehicle must be fit for its purpose. So if you tell the salesperson you need to tow a giant boat, they've got to get you a vehicle that can tow that giant boat. Of course, in this image here, that cute little car, I highly doubt it's going to be able to tow that. So make sure you tell the salesperson, similar to how many seats you need in the car. If you need 6 seats, 7 seats to bring your family, tell them that, because they have to get you a vehicle that's fit for its purpose. Go for a thorough test drive in the vehicle, not just a little putter around the block. Hit the buttons, hit the brake, hit the gas, check your blind spots. You're probably going to drive this car for many years. Make sure you're comfortable for it. And finally, only agree to pay for optional products or services that you want and believe have value. So we're living right now in a world of pandemic. I haven't really addressed the elephant in the room here, or should I say in this virtual room that we're in. Can a dealer sell a car online? Or better yet, can you buy a car online? Yes, you can. Of course you can. So especially when dealers were closed, you were able to buy a vehicle online, and you still are today. I understand if you don't want to go into a car dealership for physical distancing things, but some of you may need a card. The rules are the same. You're still covered by consumer protection laws. There are still advertising rules. You are still entitled to full disclosure of a vehicle's history and condition. There are cancellation rights, and you have access to the compensation fund. All the rules are the same. Now, there's a few things I want to cover about buying a car online. Ask for a virtual tour of the vehicle. Instead of going into the dealership, perhaps set up a video chat with the dealer and get them to give you a virtual tour, highlighting all the features. So good things about the car: heated seats, a stereo system, a navigation system, and even defects on the vehicle, especially if it's used. What are the defects? Are there any rust spots? You can do that all on video chat. And the same with discussing the price. You can do that electronically. You can have all your negotiations done electronically. But there's a few things I want to note here. It is illegal for a dealer to trade off their registered premise. The Motor Vehicle Dealers Act says they must trade on their registered premises. That means they cannot come to your house to discuss the price of the vehicle. They cannot come to your house to sign the contract for that vehicle. They can't come there. They can bring a car to your house for a test drive, but they can't engage in price discussion and trade. It's illegal for them to do that. So when it comes to signing a contract, they could simply email it to you, and you can sign that contract on your own and send it back to them. That is perfectly allowed, but they can't physically bring that contract to your house. Remember this, there's no cooling off period still. So with online sales, there is still no cooling off period. So whether you're signing it at the dealership or you're signing it in your home after you received it by email from the dealer, it's still a final sale. So let's say you did that contract totally remotely. You decided, you know what, I don't even want to test drive the car. I'm still going to buy that vehicle without test driving it. The sale is still going to be final. So you have to be absolutely sure that you want it. You may add a condition on that contract that says, you know what, I want to have a 3-day period, a cooling off period after the sale to think about the car after I buy it. Again, a dealer can say no to that condition. They can say no. But if you're buying a car sight unseen, you may want to consider asking that dealer to put in a cooling off period, because the law says there isn't one unless you add it into that contract. So let's say, you know what, Scott, this is way too much to take in. You've told me way too much stuff. I'm just going to buy a car privately. You are more than welcome to do that. I will not say no. Of course, it is not my position to say no. The decision is yours. I just ask you be an informed car buyer if you decide to do so. Now, let's say you run into a problem. You buy a car privately and something goes wrong. Maybe they didn't disclose something to you or you're not sure. Can you give us a call at OMVIC for help? Or are you on your own? Unfortunately, you're going to be on your own. That's not to say that if you call OMVIC, we are not going to laugh at you and say, too bad you bought privately. We will do whatever we can to assist, even if it's referring you to a service that can provide you with, I think, 30 minutes of free legal advice. OMVIC cannot get involved in private disputes. If you buy privately, we legally cannot get involved. It is a civil matter between you and the seller. We only have jurisdiction over car dealers. So if you're buying privately, you're going to have to take matters into your own hands. Ask questions. How long do they own the vehicle? Do they have any maintenance records, oil changes? Why are they selling it? Ask these kind of questions. Ask them for ID and compare it to the ownership. They should probably match. If those things don't match, why are they selling a car that isn't in their name? Again, take it for a thorough test drive. Purchase and review that vehicle history report. I mentioned that. In this circumstance here, you're probably going to have to buy one. $50 today to buy that report could save you thousands of dollars in the future. You're also going to get something called a UVIP. Now, a UVIP is called a used vehicle information package that the seller must provide. This typically happens when you go to the Ministry, Service Ontario, to transfer the ownership from the seller's name to the buyer's name. UVIP is going to tell you previous owner information. So there you'd be able to see if it was owned by a daily rental company. You'd be able to see how many owners had it. And you'd also be able to see how long the person you're buying it from owned that vehicle. Make sure all the pages are in that UVIP report and you go through it thoroughly. It'll also tell you if there are liens on it. So if there's any outstanding loans, it's illegal for a dealer to sell you a vehicle with an outstanding lien on it. That's also from the Sale of Goods Act. You're entitled to something called quiet possession. But when you're buying privately, double check that. You can buy a car proof report that will tell you if there are liens. That is a nationwide search, whereas the UVIP is only in Ontario. I cannot stress this point number 7 enough. When you buy privately, even if you're buying from a dealer, but especially when you buy privately, get the vehicle inspected by a trusted mechanic. Again, $100 today or however much it costs for your mechanic to look at that vehicle could save you thousands of dollars down the road. And request a receipt that has the seller's information and the actual selling price. Some kind of contract that says, I, Scott Long, bought this little sedan from Nadine on June 15th for $5,000. Just proof that a transaction took place. Get one of those there. So I'm going to move into curbsiders now. Curbsiders, and I've mentioned this a couple times. They are illegal, unlicensed dealers. And I want to thank you, Nadine. Maybe you can ask the question for us, Nadine, with curbsiders now and some confusion we could potentially have. Well, I think we got you on mute, Nadine.
Sorry about that, Scott. I think I had tried to share earlier and didn't realize I was muted either. No, I know
I'm sorry.
During this time that it's become quite common to see curbsiding as a positive thing. You go and pick something up curbside, someone leaves something for you curbside, and it's become part of our new language. But when it comes to buying a car, it's a totally different situation, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's completely different. When we refer to curbsiders, we're referring to those as illegal, unlicensed dealers. So there's some dealerships may offer curbside pickup, curbside delivery. You're going to go to the grocery store and get your curbside pickup. When we talk about curbsiders, and of course we've had this term well before COVID-19, but we're referring to them as an illegal, unlicensed dealer, a private seller, or sorry, someone who is a dealer pretending to be a private seller. They should have registration with OMVIC, but they're choosing to not get it to circumvent the rules. So how do we spot these illegal, unlicensed dealers, these curbsiders? First off, when you called up a private seller, ask them, I'm calling about the car for sale. If they say, which one? That is a red flag. It's not common that someone is selling more than one vehicle. Number 2, the price is below market value. The deal is too good to be true. If everywhere we're looking at these cars has been $10,000 and next thing you know, we find it for $6,000, that could be a red flag. It is way too below market value. Many curbsiders are going to go to salvage, remember salvage vehicle auctions, purchase them for a cheap price, fix them up cheaply, potentially illegally, and resell them to you, an unsuspecting consumer, without any disclosure. So they're still making a lot of money on it. The vehicle isn't registered in their name, or it was registered into their name for a short period of time. That is a red flag. It's not common. Someone may own a car for only a week. They don't provide you with a UVIP or discourage you from getting a vehicle history report. What are they trying to hide? They appear to be operating from some kind of business. Now, if you are looking at a business for a vehicle, you can go to OMVIC.ca, find a dealer/salesperson in the top right corner, and our website will tell you if that dealership is registered or not. You'll be able to see their some registration history, if OMVIC has maybe disciplined them, if we've ever proposed to take away their license. It'll also tell you who works there and when their licenses expire. If they don't come up on our website under as a registered dealer, that is a red flag. They could be a curbsider. The private seller is using a different color license plate. They're using maybe a mechanic license plate or a dealer plate. A normal person may have their personal plates on the vehicle or no plates whatsoever. So that is another thing to watch for. They discourage you from getting a mechanical inspection. They don't want you to get that car inspected because it could have been written off in an accident. They don't want you to find that out. And finally, the seller won't provide you with a receipt or go into a proof of purchase or contract with you. What are they trying to hide? Use your feelings at this point as well. These are common red flags of curbsiders. If you're getting anything here that says, you know what, maybe they're a curbsider, shop elsewhere. Buy from someone else, buy from a dealer, buy from someone else in those capacities because this is your money and there's only another million cars for sale out there. I believe I'm coming into the end of the presentation here. Oh, no, sorry, one last thing, my apologies. I want to show you guys very quickly how you can research a car's history yourself. Again, the two best ways to do it are getting a vehicle history report and a vehicle inspection. I always encourage both of those things. More often than not, dealers will do these two things to make sure that they're giving you sufficient disclosure as they're required by law. But on the next slide here, I can show you how to get a Carfax report. You simply go to carfax.ca, you select the report you want, and you enter your VIN. Claims report's going to talk about almost everything we discussed today, except for liens. If you get a verified report, it will give you lien information. But remember, it's illegal for a dealer to sell a car with an outstanding lien on it. Vehicle history reports are fantastic. Normally, I wouldn't have any. I wouldn't be giving you a specific product, but Carfax Canada is the only one available right now to consumers in Canada. But a vehicle history report is no way a guarantee that disclosure is being met. Dealers still have to take due diligence to ensure they're providing you with sufficient disclosure. They can't simply hand you a copy of this Carfax report and say, here's everything you need to know. If there's a disclosure, it has to be in writing on the contract. And moving on, now I'm at the end. I'm sorry I got ahead of myself there. I know Nadine may have a few questions for me, and we can open up the floor as well.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thanks so much, Scott. I'm just going to actually go to this slide as well, just so that people know how to reach you. Thank you. Have the email there. Well, I did get a couple questions. Can you just, Scott, tell me which kind of car to buy? Like, can you make some recommendations for me?
No, that's a great question. But here at OMVIC, that is not a service we provide. Our job is to regulate motor vehicle sales in Ontario and enforce the law. We don't provide services on what kind of car you should buy. I recommend going onto the internet and looking up services. I believe one's called the APA, Car Help Canada. And what they can do is they can maybe help you buy a vehicle, or you can talk to your dealer, your trusted dealer and salesperson, and ask them what kind of car best suits your needs. Unfortunately, I'm not able to give you that advice.
So what happens if I do all these things and I still end up with a car that's just an absolute lemon? Like I buy a lemon.
That's a great question. So here in Ontario, we don't have lemon laws, but there is something called CAMVAP, C-A-M-V-A-P, the Canadian Motor Vehicle Arbitration Plan. Now, not all manufacturers are part of this. There are a select few that don't participate. But if you have a vehicle that's, I believe, 4 or 5 years or newer and 160,000 kilometers or less on the odometer there, it may be eligible for CAMVAP. And CAMVAP is arbitration between the manufacturer and the consumer. So a vehicle that has manufacturer defects, a lemon, that is not the dealer's fault in those circumstances there. So that's why CAMVAP exists, to bring arbitration to say, you know what, okay, we see here that this car is a lemon. They may order the manufacturer to buy that vehicle back, or may order the manufacturer to make certain repairs to it. And it's binding arbitration, meaning that no matter what they say, has to happen. Again, not all manufacturers participate in CAMVAP, but most of them do. Feel free to go to hpl.ca to see if your vehicle is eligible. I hope you don't have to do that, but it is there if you need it.
So you can't recommend what car to buy, but can you recommend what dealership I should go to buy a car?
Good question. And again, I'm going to recommend you go on our website, OMVIC.ca. Click at the top right corner there, find a dealer/salesperson, and it'll tell you if the vehicle's ever had any discipline matters. Perhaps we may have disciplined a dealer for violating all-in price advertising, and the information will be shown there. We don't have a list of dealers that abide by the law and those who don't. If a dealer is caught, we are required by law to make the administrative action, the enforcement action, public. But if there were a way to give some kind of list out there that shows the best dealers to go to and the ones that to not go to, I'd welcome you to share that with me. But it's frankly impossible for us to develop something like that, and that is not our job here at OMVIC to do so.
So with some of the restrictions in place right now, and maybe I don't feel so safe going to a dealership to test drive a car, can they bring the car to my home? I think you said something about that, to test drive it.
Yes, I did. So a dealer is welcome to bring the car to your home to test drive the vehicle. We actually, some time ago now, right when dealers were allowed to open, OMVIC released COVID-19 crisis guidelines. It's for safe dealership sales operations. So dealers don't have to follow them. There are government controls in place for their specific business that they have to follow to operate safely to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And we recommended to dealers to adopt a touchless test drive policy, meaning that they may bring that car to your home, have it disinfected, all sorts of things like that to ensure that you can drive a clean and safe vehicle alone to comply with physical distancing. So of course, a dealer is allowed to bring a vehicle to your home. But in those circumstances there, when they are bringing it to your house, they can't come sit down at your table and talk about, go over the contract with you, because then they'd be trading off of their premises. And usually in a remote test drive, especially with physical distancing, they would likely leave the keys, maybe in your mailbox or leave at your front door, and they would maybe have another vehicle waiting for them, or just wait around while you go and test drive that car. But it totally depends on the dealership's policies at that point.
But you were saying I can go into a dealership now? When did that become? They're open again for business?
Yes, they are open again for business. I believe it was May the 4th. I may be wrong on that. They were open by appointment only. But now dealerships are fully open. As long as they are complying with the government controls, you may go into a dealership now. You don't need an appointment unless the dealership has a policy saying you need one. But you are welcome to go to a dealership as long as physical distancing and all of those things are complied with to purchase a vehicle.
That's wonderful, Scott. Let me just check if there were any other additional questions. If there's anything else you'd like to share right now, I'm just going to look back into a different part of our screen here.
Of course, yeah.
I think we've covered everything, which is fantastic.
I think we did. Yes, I know it's a lot of information to take in, but I hope everyone was able to stay tuned. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person to do so, but I think this will work for now.
Well, Scott, I can't thank you enough for first being our guest and sharing with us all your tips, and also, helping us navigate how to buy a car either online or in person, and how to do that in the safest possible way. And hopefully end up with a great car and at a good price.
I certainly hope so as well. Yes. And you have our contact information up on the screen there. OMVIC.ca is a great way to get to us. Our office is currently closed right now, so you won't be able to come in. We are all working remotely as well, as you can see. I tried to put one of those backgrounds on my screen to hide my wall behind me and stuff. But yes, we're open virtually, via email, via telephone. Feel free to reach out to us at any time, and we'll be happy to help.
Well, once again, thank you so much. And we're hoping that we're also going to be able to have this presentation available at a later date on demand. So for those that weren't able to join us live tonight with Scott, that they'll be able to click on it and review the presentation at their leisure, as well as the questions and the contact information. So I hope everyone has a terrific evening. Good luck with all your future car purchases. And thank you so much, Scott, for joining us tonight. And take care and stay well.
Yes, thank you, Nadine, and to Hamilton Public Library, and to Christine as well for getting us set up here. Thank you all so much. It was a great opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Have a good night.
Thanks a lot. You too. Bye-bye.